21 Savage's dreadlocks is that he has a whole lot of dreadlocks. A lot of people always ask the question, how do I get a lot of dreadlocks? And it's really plain and simple. I did a video on this on my main channel recently talking about how to make your dreadlocks skinnier, which in the result of making your dreadlocks skinnier, you're going to have more dreadlocks overall. So right off the bat, if you're starting your dreadlocks out and you want a lot, make sure that when you make your sections that they are skinny. The smaller your sections are, the more dreadlocks you will have, regardless. Now, of course, when it comes to different hair types, it's good to make thicker sections for a straighter hair type, but doesn't mean that you can't get them as skinny as you would like them to. And realistically, you can get the same sections with any hair type, as long as you use the right tools. And speaking of the tools, if you were to create a small section on straight hair, I would definitely recommend using a crochet hook from Dreadlocks.com, which that is linked down below. But the reason I'm saying that is because you can't do 2-strand twist or twisting with gel or really any other method with straight hair on a small section. I mean, you could, it would just take an extremely long amount of time and a lot of effort in order for it to actually turn into a dreadlock. So I figured it would just be best to do them instantly, with starting out with twist and rip and then going in with the crochet hook. And of course you could tie off your roots using the Dreadlocks interlock tool. And that's why those tools work so great together. And they are honestly the two best tools for dreadlocks, and that's why I always recommend them. And if you guys want them, like I said, they're in the link down below. But of course, with 21 Savage's dreadlocks, his hair type is around a 4B, so of course his hair isn't straight, but I wanted to mention that for all the straight hair people out there. Now we began to notice that 21 Savage was actually doing his hair in somewhat of a hairstyle, and just with the way that he's styling it and putting it in position versus him doing, braids or 2-strand twists, because we hardly ever see him do that. And honestly, I don't think I've ever seen him do 2-strand twists or braids on his hair. But since I did mention to you his hair type, with it being a 4B, it makes the hair extremely easy to lock up. And that's why it was hard to even tell that he actually got rid of his first set of dreadlocks and then he started a second set. That's because his hair locked up extremely quick. And of course, it's not 100% locked up. It's still on its way, but with it being in a 4B, it holds this position extremely well. Now 21 Savage does also have a high top fade with his dreadlocks, which in result, his hair stands up quite a bit. Even when his dreadlocks were long, it still stood up. Now I'm not saying if you have a high top fade of dreadlocks that your hair is going to stand up. The biggest reason why the hair will stand up is because of the roots not being maintained all the way down. And even with his roots not being maintained all the way down, his hair is still in really good shape. And the reason being is because I think he's doing some form of separation and maybe a little bit of twisting. But honestly, it's not a whole lot because we don't ever see his sections all the way down to the roots. We just know that his hair is sectioned off properly. But even in the beginning stages of his dreadlocks, we see that his hair is still butted off pretty properly, and it doesn't look like he's struggling at all with his hair actually beginning to lock up. But on the flip side of that, if your hair is hard to lock, whether it's straight or even if it's gray, I just spoke to somebody recently who has gray hair, and they were mentioning to me that gray hair is actually a little harder to lock up. And I mentioned to them the tools that I mentioned earlier on in this video with using the Dreadlocks crochet hook and the Dreadlocks interlock tool. Those tools are literally indiscriminate. It doesn't matter your color of your skin or the color of your hair or even the texture of your hair. They work on all hair textures, and I honestly encourage every single person to use it because it's good not only for starting out the dreadlocks, but it's also great for maintaining them along the way. And if you were to ask me 6 years ago how to get dreadlocks, I would have not known how to get them. And I tried so many different methods and nothing was really working. I tried twisting with wax, I tried twisting with gel, and those are all the traditional methods that I thought were the only things you can do in order to get dreadlocks. And then I found out how to do instant locks using the Dreadlocks crochet hook, and honestly, it's changed the game for getting dreadlocks for everybody. And it literally makes it so easy. But I think the most iconic thing about 21 Savage's dreadlocks is that he has a ton of dreadlocks. Even with his hair being in a high top fade, it still looks like he probably has around 200 dreadlocks on his head. Now if he were to have a full head of dreadlocks, he would be around maybe 400 dreadlocks, and that's quite a bit. One thing I have learned with having skinny and more dreadlocks is that it takes quite some time to do the maintenance, and that's just one thing that you have to count the cost in the beginning because it does take quite a bit of work. But it's definitely worth it in the long run because it's the style that I'm going for. And if you want to get dreadlocks like 21 Savage or myself, you just have to create those small sections in order to create the skinny dreadlocks, because the sections are the most important part of the dreadlock. Because even if you were to have bigger sections, you can still get your dreadlocks to be skinnier because of maturity. But the issue is that you're not going to have more dreadlocks. And more dreadlocks just give you a more full look. It makes the scalp look more pleasing to the eye. And overall, in my opinion, I just really like the look of it. Now, of course, there's people out there that want thicker dreadlocks, like people that get wicks or freeform dreadlocks. And that's completely okay because I like those as well. It's really just a personal preference of what you want to do with your dreadlocks. Just keep in mind, if you want thick dreadlocks, create thick sections. If you want skinny dreadlocks, make skinny sections. And in other words, if you want a lot of dreadlocks, make skinny sections. And if you want less dreadlocks, make bigger sections. And these are all things I learned from 21 Savage's dreadlocks. His Simply those things of creating small sections and getting small dreadlocks. Now, of course, there is a downside to that with the dreadlocks being a little too skinny and they could possibly fall out. But I think it's worth the cost because you have so many dreadlocks to deal with, and of course if a dreadlock does end up falling out, you can always reattach it using a great last crochet hook. And that's why this tool is literally so crucial, because it can literally do anything and help your dreadlocks